Getting on the same page financially can be difficult for couples at any time, but COVID-19 has brought a new array of concerns when it comes to spending and saving. Tonight, I talked with Mike Kojonen from Principal Preservation Services about the 3 things you should be discussing with your partner right now. Mike, thanks for joining us. We'll start with the first question. Why is right now, in the midst of a pandemic, the right time to talk about money with your partner?
Yeah, right now with a third of Americans, or couples, I should say, are having stress dealing with their finances. And we know that money and finances is a cause of about half of the divorces out there. Then you add in the pandemic, and then you add in the recession, then you add in possible job loss. And if you get behind on bills, it's a very stressful time right now. So we got to tackle the issues and get together and get on the same page and be a team together to get through this.
The first step, of course, is just starting that conversation, but maybe people don't know how to start it. So what would be a good question to kind of broach the topic?
Well, you got a couple things here. Is you got to talk about, do we have that emergency fund? Hopefully you guys are talking about finances, but more than half of Americans have less than $1,000 in that emergency fund. And that's not really counting as an emergency fund. You should have 3 to 6 months of your expenses set aside. And so it really comes down to the basics again. You have to do that budget worksheet. I have one on my website. You can download that at principalpreservationservices.com. But you have to write down all the income coming in, all the expenses going out. But then with those expenses, categorize those as needs or wants, right? You have your necessities, you have your food, you have your gas, car insurance, mortgage, whatever it might be. But then you're going to see these expenses that you had through the month that really weren't a necessity, that's really not causing you to build up that emergency fund. So you should take that money aside. I know it's tough. You have to discipline yourself for this year. Maybe it's for next year, right? That you have to just not have some of those extras this year to get through 2020, but next year you'll probably be able to have those again, but build that emergency fund up.
Sometimes this turns into a very honest conversation where you're revealing certain things about yourself that maybe your significant other doesn't know, and one that comes to mind is debt you might have.
Yeah, whether it's credit card, car loans, student loan debt. I think a lot of people get in relationships not really being honest about how big their student loan debt. Yeah, and 2/3 of graduates last year, college graduates, graduated with almost $30,000 in student loan debt. So you have to have that conversation. Figure out, what is the amount of debt you have, because you're making the payments, but what's the terms left? How much longer do you have? This might be a great opportunity. We've seen some really good low interest rates right now, opportunity to consolidate some of that debt, to get lower payments so you can make better gains on that principal, or else just a lower interest rate. So whether it be the car, credit card, or student loans, look to see if there's any better terms out there.
So we've talked about preparing for an emergency, maybe trying to slowly clear some of the debt you have. How do you broach the conversation about looking towards your future together, your finances years, decades ahead?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's tough in this year, 2020. Most people just want to get through it and let it be done. And everybody's talking about 2021 already, but you can't forget about the future. You have to look at the future and not just today. So when you're doing that budget worksheet, hopefully you're putting money in there on that budget worksheet for your retirement. So you should be planning for your 401ks, 403bs should be on that budget worksheet, or if you're funding your IRAs or Roths, should be on there as well. You need to be planning for the future. You can't just be focusing on today.
You mentioned the budget worksheet. Is that something you would suggest specifically when it comes to how should couples keep their finances on track during this pandemic?
Yeah, they should. I mean, look at that. But going through that tough time, how do you keep on track? And my wife and I mean, it was a story done a few years ago on WCCO that we went through a tough financial situation over a decade ago. And so I've gone through this, and it's stressful, it's tough. What I will say is, the biggest key that we got through this is, we sat down together constantly, and probably every couple of weeks, and talked about things, how we're going to get through it. We can only do what we can do. We talked about our finances. We talked about the income or lack of income at the time, the expenses going out. And so if you can talk monthly or quarterly, that's important. But get on the same page is so important. You're going to take some fails. You're going to step back. But the key is, as long as you're constantly moving forward, and that's important. And you might have to seek help from a financial professional. Just get that outside perspective to help you along.
I was just going to ask about that. The people in a couple, they might think certain ways just within their personal bubble. How helpful can it be to have that objective party to jump in and kind of get a lay of the land of the finances between both parties?
It's so important because you can only see, I mean, the old saying, you're so close to the trees, you don't see the forest thing. And when you meet with a professional, this is what they do day in, day out, and been doing it for years and have, met with thousands of people throughout the years. They're going to see things from a different perspective than you're going to see it. And, little things about, taking money out of your 401k to pay a loan off, and just to show you the tax implications, what that could hurt you. Because some people I just want to get this debt paid off, and I'm going to take money out of my IRAs and 401ks to do that. But to show you the real numbers, why that's probably not a good idea for most people to do, is important to see those numbers instead of just, being a black and white issue that most couples see it that way.
For more money advice from Mike, just go to WCCO.com.